Welcome back to your favorite gaming podcast. I'm Orange Albatross, and today I have Mitch here, who is one of the developers for Sector's Edge, a game that, when did it come out, Mitch?
Came out originally 2 years ago, and we've just relaunched it last month.
It's in beta right now, if I'm correct, yeah?
Yeah, in the new beta.
Awesome. And I actually saw it because of a viral tweet that Jake Lucky sent out, so shout out to Jake Lucky if for some reason you're watching. Um, and I downloaded it with a couple of friends, had a blast. So I'm just really excited to talk to you about the whole indie developer process, especially where
Yeah.
you're in a very unique position after a few conversations we had. So just to kick things off, what sets a successful indie game apart from others, from other indie games?
I would say when there's thousands of indie games being released, I'd say there's two things that make one successful. The first one is having an art style which is first bring in an audience, captivate people, get their attention. But then the second thing is the gameplay needs to be fun. Like all games, it can either be really immersive, a game could be interesting, but if it's not fun, it's not going to keep people in and keep people recommending the game to other people. And so I've found that with so many game engines coming out, making indie gaming more accessible to new people, it's you're going to have so many beautiful games coming out and so many games that look really good and are captivating, but there's only going to be a few that people are going to call successful. I believe that that comes down to the gameplay and whether or not it's a fun game that you can enjoy playing.
I got you. Yeah, there's some games I've played upwards of maybe 100 indie titles, but I think only maybe a dozen that I put more than 10 hours into or
Yeah.
so. Certain ones come to mind, like Stardew Valley. You know, my wife
Yes.
is logged a
Yeah.
few hundred hours on that, and there are just certain games where I can just throw myself at it. So that makes a lot of sense. Especially, I've played Sector's Edge, and one of the things I've noticed about it is the aesthetics are nice and they're very fun. It kind of feels like a mix of like Teardown with an FPS game, which is it's a really unique
Yeah.
experience. And I think that the unique experience keeps it fun as well. Like when I watch a skyscraper just crumble down, I kind of lean back and I'm like, oh my god! It's just like even
Yeah.
just seeing those things in between gunfights, that is fun as well. The environment is fun. So I think you definitely hit the nail on the head with that.
Yeah.
Where do you
Thank
draw the
you.
line at aesthetics versus gameplay? So at what point do you have to say, okay, this looks great, but it doesn't add to the
Yeah.
gameplay?
Yeah. I would say I choose gameplay 100% all of the time. And then my brother, who's responsible for all the art, all the modeling, he has to rein me back in a bit and say, no, like, we need to improve this bit here first, improve the animations, improve these textures here, just because we want it to still have that production quality to it. So I'd say that definitely gameplay is first priority for me, but you got to back it up with something that can just convey to your game that it's professional, that you're going to have a good time playing it, that you're going to that love and care has actually gone into how we want to portray our game. I was always taught by my parents from a young age to always look respectable because first impressions do matter.
Hmm.
But then again, you got to have as a person, you got to have a good character and nice qualities about you that will keep people like make friends and keep people interested in your game from a gaming perspective. So it's kind of the outer shell versus the inner shell is what I'm trying to say.
That's a really good way to look at it. I like that. I met plenty of people in my time where like you meet them, you're like, oh, they're really nice, and then you find out there's not. You know, a couple days later, they're like, oh, I'm cool with you, and you find out that what's on the inside, you're like, that did not match
Yeah,
the first
yeah,
impression. Um, and it's funny the way that you mention that your brother is like, no, we have to apply this part of the art to it. You put out a
yeah,
tweet recently mentioning that you increased the performance where it's sending less data during multiplayer
yeah,
matches. Is that correct?
yeah, yeah. Networking.
Was that a difficult thing to do? Did it involve art at all? Did you have to sacrifice anything for that, or was it just a matter of kind of figuring out how to be a little more efficient?
Yeah, just a matter of figuring it out. There's some features where we say like, no, we can't focus on the art. We've got to spend our time on this part of it here. But with things like networking, we can. It's not. I guess it's not limited to visuals or aesthetics. We can just say that this data needs to be sent only every certain amount of frames. For example, the issue that we had was that ammo bonuses. So when a player dies, they drop a little ammo bonus on the ground, and it's just sitting there broadcasting its position out to all of the players at max frame rate. And so we're wondering why like network usage was increasing over time as these matches were running. Notice all these ammo bonuses littered around the map, just saturating the
Yeah.
networking. And so when we first launched, we noticed like this we're getting all these network alerts saying like you've exceeded like 36 megabits per second. We're thinking like none of this adds up. And so we just had to just take a step back, just go through all the basics, monitor things, and make sure like that, like figure out where these issues are being coming from. And so I could do this while Simon's still like animating models and things. So I guess that's why having a two-person team's good. One of us can just be on the tech support, making sure things are working well, and the next person's just working on the next features and what's coming up next.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's interesting because the first thing I would look at is, and I'm not a developer, but I would just look at like how the players are interacting with the game. I would completely gloss over something that fundamental like the ammo box
Yeah.
animations. Do they despawn or do they just kind of sit there for the
No,
whole
they don't
match?
despawn.
So that
No.
can add up to be quite a bit during those high
Yeah.
kill matches where, oh,
Yeah.
okay, I can see how that'd be an
Yeah.
issue.
I,
That
I didn't I didn't even expect that at first. I was thinking it was either like player positions are being like sent out too much or a packet was like 3 times the size normal, but no, it was these little ammo bonuses sitting around mocking me.
was one of those moments where you looked and you were like, just like your hand on your
Yeah,
forehead, like it was
it
just right
was.
there the whole time, spinning, looking up at you like, you don't see me, but I'm here.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So you mentioned earlier you were talking about game engines. You built your own game engine. So what does that do to your development process specifically?
To our development process, it makes it a lot slower. 100%. Like things that like we would have had from the get-go with animation system with using our like Unity or Unreal would have been animation systems, rendering, importing models and networking and having to do each of those things ourselves. We wanted to learn as much as we could. Like we didn't want to just smash out a game as quick as we could. Like we wanted to like even if the game wasn't successful, walk away with so much new knowledge of how 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 lower level things work, how how all our processes would fit together. Like Simon
Yeah,
making a model to me, importing it to me, rendering it, like having an
every step of
understanding
the
of the
way.
entire process. Yeah, it's it's definitely taken a lot longer. I think it took me like 6 months just to get the animation system to work, which was importing Simon's models into the game, like the bones and rigging and getting all that done. But now that it's done and we have 100% control over it, we can optimize it, we can adapt it to new things. It's like our own like little universe within this game that we can just we're not restricted in what we want to do.
Yeah,
And so I'd say that if I knew it would have taken 5 years, I definitely would have been a lot daunting at the start. But now that I'm here, I can 100% say that yeah, I don't regret going with our own engine.
absolutely. And so I know very little about the business side of it, but I know Steam obviously takes a cut. They have to make money
Yeah,
somehow. But isn't it true that if you use something like Unreal Engine, up to a certain amount of money that you make on the game, they don't charge you, but after that, there's like a
yeah,
licensing fee per title that you
yeah,
sell?
yeah.
Okay,
I
so
think
yeah,
that was
that
a
would
good.
also add up
Yeah,
too. So you have the benefit of not having to worry about that for because you have
yeah,
your own
yeah,
engine.
that's true.
Do you see
Yeah,
yourself using it for another game in the future as well? Is it something you can
yeah.
build on?
Yeah, I would definitely want to keep using my stuff just because, not because the other game engines are bad. It's just that with our game engine, we can just cut out everything that we don't need, and because of that, the game can run faster. The game download is smaller, and when we're diagnosing issues, if there's a problem with Unreal Engine, I don't know if there are many. Like it's outside of my control.
Hmm.
Like having full responsibility and full control is definitely a, like a lot more pressure on us, but having that control and just being able to fix things and not being limited is something that we like.
Yeah. I hadn't even thought of that. If like Unreal Engine's encountering some kind of issue, your business is going to suffer. So now
Yeah,
you're in control of that too. So I imagine there's so many other different layers that go into
yeah.
that, but that is really interesting. So 5 years to develop the engine is that's quite a commitment, and I commemorate you for that.
It's been continuous. It wasn't just 5 years on the engine. It was pretty
Hmm.
much like 2 years on the engine, then building some features on it, then another 6 months on the engine, building more features on it. So
Gotcha.
they're both hand in hand.
Awesome. Um, so we've talked about indie, and that's kind of what the whole episode's about. But it branches into AAA titles. I probably spend like 75% of my time on AAA titles, and I have some indies that I play. One of my favorite, just as an honorable mention, is Hollow Knight. I don't know if you've played that or not. Team Cherry is amazing. I've actually replayed that
Mhm.
game like 4 times. So there are just
Yeah,
certain titles like that I can keep running. But since AAA games obviously kind of dominate the industry, where do you feel that AAA games get in their own way? In a way that indie games don't.
I would say just around the financial aspect, like AAA games that have a massive backing and a massive funding behind it, and they've kind of got that pressure to make sure that in their game there's enough ways to recuperate their losses. And we can see that in Battlefield 2042 is the example I always come back to. That's the most recent AAA game that I played, which I feel like really just put so many things in the way of you just wanting to experience the Battlefield experience that we were all promised. And like you launch into the game, like you got loading screen upon loading screen upon like matchmaking systems that you don't have control of to networking problems. And there's just things that it's like you just want to play the game. Like, why are there so many barriers of entry to it?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like AAA games are like that. I haven't really worked on one, so I can't fully say this, but I feel like there's pressure on the devs more to put in features that will make them money than to spend their time on features that are going to make people have a good experience with it. Versus an indie game, we really want people to enjoy their experience on it so that then like they can support the game financially in the future. So it's kind of chicken versus the egg versus egg versus chicken. With indie games, we're already working on it in our spare time. Like, we're not working on it full time. We don't have huge losses to recuperate, so we can really just focus on making a game that's fun and that people are going to enjoy, and then hope from there that we can build it into from a side gig into a full time thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. What is your favorite part of the development process of making a game? And as you kind of mentioned, you're living like the hybrid life. You still got your main
Yeah,
source of income, and then you're doing that. So, is it like just that when you're out of work for the day, you get to go home and do your favorite thing?
yeah, it is. It's. I'll probably start with my least favorite thing, which is when things go wrong. Like,
Yeah.
if the best times I have are when things go right. I'm just experimenting with new features and there's nothing really holding me back. But when there's like hidden bugs in places that I'm just completely stumped on, versus times where it's just like Simon makes like a really cool model and I can just put it into the game, we can experiment it with it straight away. It's like that innovative side of it where we just making our own things, not held back by anything. That's like the best memories I have working with Simon in situations like that.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, I've only from reading, but I've read that some developers will hit a bug and it'll take sometimes months for them to figure out.
Yeah,
It happens on a lot of AAA titles because there's so many different hands in the pot, and so you don't
yes,
know exactly what's wrong. So I imagine, just to add onto the conversation earlier, that's probably another benefit of being in charge of your own engine, being a two-man
yeah,
team. You can just call up your brother and be like, "Hey, this is busted," and he'll be like, "Try this." You can just kind of bounce
yeah,
off each
yeah.
other.
Had so many moments like that. Yes.
All right.
Yeah, that's a small team thing as well as a own engine thing. The fact that between us, we pretty much know how everything works, whereas in a larger team, there's people responsible for graphics, for UI, for sound, for modeling. Um, I've always heard that the more people you bring in a project, the more it slows it down. And like, it's true in some regards, but in other regards, like, you got people just focusing on their one specialty,
Yeah.
which is why you do get AAA games with like incredible graphics and incredible sound and aspects like that. Whereas with an indie game, going back to what makes them successful, is like you won't have all those advantages. You won't be able to say in your trailer like soundtrack by Hans Zimmerman and
Yeah. Yeah.
graphics by the Dice team. You got to sell it on the fact that like, this is our game, like this is what we've made, like this is why it's just fun. And going back to the fact that, yeah, that indie games need to focus on the gameplay and the fun before they go spending huge budgets on graphics and cutting edge technology like that.
Absolutely. I find myself, anytime there's an option to setting everything to the best optimal performance. I enjoy the aesthetics of games, but if
Mm.
I can set it lower and get higher frames, the whole frames
Yeah,
win games
definitely.
mindset where I do a lot of FPS things. But even in other games, if I can just boost performance at a slight loss of visuals, I usually do it. So I think that you and
Yeah,
I are kind of on the same page in that
yeah,
regard. Anytime I load up a new shooter, the first thing I do is I turn everything down if I can.
yeah,
Pretty much. But so what does an average day of game development look like for you? Obviously, where it's not full time, I know there are probably some
yeah.
days where you can't get to something, but when you have
Mm.
time to sit down and put in some work, how does it go? What's the flow?
It usually goes with, I've either got a feature I really want to work on or a massive list of bugs that I want to work on. Where the bugs list is always there looking at me thinking like, there's hundreds of bugs on this list. I usually try to knock out like at least a couple bugs off every day, just because like the new features are what's going to keep people, like new people, excited about the game. But the longer you encounter a bug as a player, the more it really gets on your nerves. And so I've got to manage my time between whether I want to spend today on a new destruction system or spending a day fixing a networking bug, which has been plaguing certain users for so long. And so it depends on what's coming up too. Like there's so many, like I'm pretty lenient with it. Like I'm not gonna like beat myself up if I'm working on this bug versus this one. But a typical day is just check Discord, go through the bugs list, see if there's anything I want to work on, if there's anything that stands out, knock out a few of those, put it in the change log, and like just show that like these things are being worked on. And then if I have extra time after that, I'll work on destruction system or improve some audio or make a new map. Or it's when you've got your own game and you've got so many things to work on, you can just choose what you want to work on. Really, like you don't have any deadline set for yourself by project managers, or it's pretty lenient, to be honest. I couldn't really give you a schedule of what one day looks like compared to the next.
I got you. Very fluid. It just kind of depends
Yeah,
on what's going on. I imagine that bug list, like you shrink it, you release some new systems, and then you get new
and then it
bug
goes back
reports,
up
and you're like,
again. Yeah,
no. So I
yeah,
can imagine that's probably quite the headache.
yeah. I've got a fixed list and a bugs list, and they're both increasing at the same rate. I think it's going to be an eternal thing.
Yeah, I gotcha. If someone's watching this because they see, hey, indie development, and that just kind of sparks their interest, if they are wanting to start their own independent game, what's the number one piece of advice, like the cardinal rule of advice you would give to them starting out?
I would say to make sure you're making something that you're going to enjoy playing. Like I think I have just as many hours playing Sector's Edge as I do making it. And there's been so many times where I've wanted to quit and stop playing it and stop working on it just because like things get overwhelming at times, and they definitely will, being a new indie game dev working on your first project. But if you enjoy playing your game and you see people enjoy playing your game, it's kind of an altruistic point of view to look at it, that the reason you're making this game is to help people enjoy their lives. And so you need to focus on the game that you want to make. If you're hung up on the graphics or if you're hung up on the gameplay, you just need to just take a step back and say, am I working on something which people are going to enjoy playing? Like it doesn't need to be the most original concept. It doesn't have to look the best. As long as someone is going to be able to sit down, enjoy themselves playing it and have a good time, I feel like that's going to give you the best bet at making a game that you're going to stick with over the years, because most games are going to take you years to make, and that when you get to the end of it, it's going to still be something that you're going to be enjoying working on and enjoying playing. I feel like that's the most important aspect for a new game dev to focus on.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I've read before that I play Apex Legends a lot, and
Yeah,
people are always like, "Did the developers even play this game?" And then developers, they'll go on Twitter and post screenshots. They're like, "Yeah, I'm in Masters lobbies. Like, I play every night," and it
yeah,
kind of it restores faith as well. You're like,
yeah,
"Oh my,
definitely.
they're actively experiencing the same things that I am. They know the bugs. They know, the pain points and all that. And it's kind of exciting when you see that. So the fact that you
Yeah,
also have
it
as many
is.
hours put into it is just that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've had comments saying, "Well, wow, the game devs in the lobby, like I didn't expect that," or "It's good to have a dev that actually plays their game," and it makes it more relatable too when people bring up like balanced discussions and gameplay discussions and things they'd like added. The fact that they know that I'm also going to be experiencing it, it's kind of a more connected conversation versus submitting feedback to a community manager, which then gets forward to the devs and you don't really know what happens to it. Just having that closer community vibe to the game like is a huge plus for indie game devs.
That makes a lot of sense. Especially because it sounds like it'd be very different feedback than what you see on Steam reviews, for example.
Yes, yeah, it is.
Steam reviews seem to be very emotionally driven anytime I read them. I
Yeah,
don't even bother reading them when I look at a game. If it doesn't say overwhelmingly positive, I'm like, that's fine. There's probably just some angry folks that, during
yeah,
a non ideal stage during development or whatever the case is. So I feel like
yeah,
getting the feedback in game would be a lot more kind and warm than reading a review where there's no connection. Would I be right in assuming
yeah,
that?
yeah. The first day after our open beta launched, someone pointed out that there were some negative reviews, and I had a look at them, and it was just like the lowest of lows of like the game dev experiences that you're going to have is reading reviews. And like there was definitely a time where I just wanted to quit. I wanted to stop working on it. I'm thinking like everything I've been working on for the past year, this person's just completely invalidated.
Hmm.
And you really need to be careful with it and focus on the people that are enjoying your game, because negative reviews are definitely going to crush you. Like it's like you can only build up so much resilience to it. You're still going to have like reviews where it says like, oh, like these three core things are broken, but wow, they put a lot of effort into their microtransactions, and you just think to yourself like it's not true, but like to yourself, but you're going to be wondering if people are going to read this review and have a bad experience because of it, or not play the game because of it. And so my other piece of feedback is with reviews is to just take it from the people who actually enjoy playing your game and have actually put some time into the game to get past the initial barrier of like the onboarding with it. And so I think with negative reviews, I'm going to try to steer clear from them and get probably community people to go through them or moderators to go through it, just because, yeah, it can be definitely be crushing going through and seeing reviews that just don't agree with that you don't agree with and you feel like unfair. But it's just something that you got to deal with as a game developer.
I can see that. I mean, again, I've gone on some game reviews, and I swear it's as simple as I dropped my hot pocket on the floor when I started the game, and then they would give it a 1 star. I'm like, that doesn't
Yeah.
even like. Sometimes I read reviews, I'm like, that
Yeah.
doesn't even really sound like it has anything to do with the game.
Yeah.
Sometimes people will log 2 hours and be like, this game's awful. I'm like, did you just not give yourself time to get used to it? So
Yeah.
I don't even put stock in them anymore. But I can imagine you see that come in, and you're like, oh, cool, a review, and then it's kind of a roll of the dice.
Yeah.
I feel like it's kind of the same effect with social media. You go on, you see this doom scroll of negativity, and after a while, you get maybe it forms an opinion about something you didn't realize
Yeah.
sets expectations. Whether it's that or movie reviews, I try to avoid reading online reviews at this point because I'm like that's not
Yeah.
going to define my experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And reading through them, it like makes me think that my own game is terrible when I know it's not. It's like such a twist going through reading like people. It's hard to explain. It's hard to not take it personally when it's like not someone that's really going to put care into the way that they're portraying their feedback. But it is important to be able to I guess ignore the messenger and listen to the message. And it's hard to do that. It's a skill that like game devs will come like be familiarized with over time. Like I've definitely have a stronger resilience to it now, but I feel like even like experienced devs on the Battlefield 2042 team, like they're still going to take it to heart when they hear that people aren't enjoying their game. Um, I guess it's a bit of the low point of indie game dev, but you just got to push past it and focus on the people who love the game and people who are there to support you.
If it's any consolation, my 8-year-old has already put in something like 20 hours, and he is way better than I am at it, and he's been having the time of his life. So he played
Yeah.
for I think about an hour and a half, 2 hours yesterday, and he came
Oh,
out and he's
nice.
like, "Dad, I got 15 kills," and I'm like, "I got 5 last time I played." Like, what are you talking about? So, if it's any consolation, you got a raving review for an 8-year-old, and I'll be sure to leave it on Steam after this because
It's great to
yeah,
hear.
he's been having a really fun time with it. What's the time frame from concept to like an alpha build where you can actually hop in and test things out?
For us, it was about a year. We had a super early concept. I think there's some footage out there of it where there's no textures. The players are just a rectangle with a cube head on top with a gun strapped to the side of their arm. And we just wanted people to come in and just test the gameplay before we'd fully like ironed everything out. And so it really depends on how low your standards are. Like for us, they were really low. We just wanted people just to get in, tell us how the gameplay felt, and just gather that feedback as soon as you can. Whereas with other games that have like more complex mechanics to it, for example, Battlefield 2042, it was years before the first um, alpha version came out for people to test in a private closed gameplay test. I mean, whereas with us, we because we weren't fully sure of what we wanted to make, we wanted to get it out into the hands of the players as soon as we could. And the closer you can get to your community and the more the more that you're comfortable sharing with them in an alpha build, like the better your game's going to be in the long run. Doesn't matter how rough it is, you're always going to look back on it and like cringe at it and think like it was just terrible. But those are the stepping stones that you really need to get out as quick as you can if you want to make a game as best as you can, I'd say.
As someone with perfectionist tendencies, I always had this thing where I would build something up in my mind and then never execute on it because I had already played through all the negatives in my head. And at this point, just start is like a simple phrase that I'm like, just do the thing, just get it out there, just start doing it. Because otherwise, you're never gonna have that rite of passage and kind of,
Yeah.
you can't be the master until you're willing to be the fool. You gotta go through the motions and
Yes,
go, oh my
definitely.
goodness, look back 6 months later and go, what was I thinking? And then 6 months later, you're like, what was I thinking then?
Yeah.
And just kind of step through it. So that's
Yeah.
awesome. Do you have anything else that you want to add?
I would say that if you have those moments like that where you look back and you're thinking, what was I thinking? At least you have something to look back on, meaning that A, you stuck it out for long enough, even though it didn't look like what you wanted to at the start. And B, the fact that you've grown, you've learned heaps about game development, even if it's not going to be applied to your first game, even your next game. It's just a stronger platform you have to build your next game. Like you're developing skills, you're developing um, just, I would say, experience with talking to players and gathering feedback and improving your game from there. And so I'd say that it's a good thing to look back on things that you're not too proud of anymore, but still the fact that you've been there and made it through it is, I guess, where most indie developers are going to stop. They're not going to have that perseverance. And it can be, it's definitely a mind game. Like you need to be able to go in there for the long run. And if you're ever feeling down, like there's so many indie developers out there which have been through the exact same thing. Like I haven't met like a closed-minded, like rude indie developer before. Like everyone's just happy to share, happy to help. It's an amazing community. And so if you're a new indie dev coming in, facing hurdles, like there's thousands of us that have been through it already. And so don't be afraid to just reach out and ask for help.
Fantastic. I think that's going to hopefully help anyone who's watching this who is considering independent development. So thank you so
Yeah.
much for your time. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you for explaining all the different processes. This is fun, but also I learn a lot too. So it's kind of like,
Yeah.
two
Good
for
to
one
hear.
on it. So you guys can go and look at the link in the description, visit Sector's Edge on Steam, download it, play it. It's a ton of fun. And I will have Mitch's link to Twitter in the description as well. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It was quite enjoyable.
Absolutely. And I'll see you next time, guys.
Yeah. See you later.